You're listening to or watching Strangers in Space, and for the next, 45 minutes maybe, we are going to be talking about Survivors of the Flux, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hello, I'm Lee.
Hi, I'm Matt.
I'm Simon.
And so Survivors of the Flux, that's us, isn't it? But here's a survivor of something slightly different, Logan's Look. Logan, a 10-year-old Australian friend who's watching through all of Doctor Who in order with his dad, has reached the back half of Series 12. So he's basically caught Flux up. Here, says his dad Adrian, are Logan's comments on the second half of Series 12. Can you hear me? This story was good, and it was unique how it had two gods who were bored and decided to induce chaos. I liked how it started in Aleppo with the weird monsters, and it made you think that they were going to be the villains. It was weird how all the people were having strange dreams, and it didn't make sense until about halfway through. I liked the twist that the person in the prison wasn't a good person, but a villain, and the Doctor's instinct was used against her. It was interesting how they talked about people's mental health. I would have liked to have seen the boogeyman because they made people's nightmares become real, and the little girl was scared of the boogeyman. Score 78 out of 100. The Haunting of Villa Diodati. This story was good, and it is definitely not the first haunted house story. I found it a little bit scary. The lone Cyberman was good, and it was strange how he still had all his emotions, unlike normal Cybermen. The Siberian being inside Shelley was weird. It was unexpected how the Doctor gave the lone Cybermen what he wanted after Captain Jack said not to give it to him. Score 80 out of 100. Ascension of the Cybermen, the Timeless Children. This story was good, and the cyber drones were a good new invention. The scenes with Brendan set in Ireland were confusing as we didn't get to see why he couldn't die. I liked how Graham and Yaz and the others hid in Cybermen suits to escape, and I liked how they were old versions of the Cybermen. All of the information about the Doctor being the Timeless Child and having lots of unknown previous regenerations was strange and confusing at the beginning, but ended up making sense. It was good how the Master created a new race of Time Lord Cybermen. It was bizarre how the Doctor was captured at the end by the Jadoon. Score 93 out of 100. But I like Ascension of the Cybermen more than the Timeless Children. So, says Adrian, Logan's favourite stories from Series 12 were the Timeless Children two-parter and the Spyfall two-parter, while his least favourite stories were Praxeus, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, and Can You Hear Me? My favourites, on the other hand, were Spyfall and Fugitive of the Jadoon, while my least favourites were Can You Hear Me and Orphan 55. Which, as a bottom 10 story, represents the dregs of Doctor Who. Get it? Regards, Adrian. And so, let's dive straight into Series 13, Flux, Chapter 5, Survivors of the Jadoon. Lee.
Jadoon?
What did I say? Chapter 5, Survivors of the Flux. Oh, I'm all over the place tonight. I'm a bit tired. I shouldn't say that really on air, should I? But there you go, I have. Lee, we'll talk about things that we've missed in future, because we will do an episode going through the whole of the series so far, and we are on a bit of a time constraint tonight. So what did you think of Survivors of the Flux?
I literally finished it 1 minute before we started this podcast, so my brain is exploding. There's a lot going on. It's not... I feel like it's confusing, but it isn't really confusing. It all makes sense. I think I've enjoyed it. I'll find out in 45 minutes.
Matt.
I think it is confusing, and I don't think it makes sense yet. So, yeah. I liked it more than episode 3. Is that right? Yeah, episode 3. I like bits of it. I just didn't think it worked with the previous episode.
Oh, I'd say it sort of did. If the previous episode is the episode comes between this and episode 3, I think it makes more sense than not. But I'll come to Simon in a second, because I think coming off the back of what you've just said, I think this is, I was gripped But at the same time, because it's episode 5 of 6, I didn't find it very satisfactory. But then you're not supposed to find it satisfactory. So I think being gripped by it was enough. And there was nothing in there that troubled me. So I was fine with it. So I enjoyed it. But I wouldn't say it was the best episode of the season. I think this was more an episode that did lots of things that it needed to do, rather than being an episode like Village of the Angels, which seemed to exist more because it wanted to do those things, if you know what I mean. And I think that's probably more or less the sort of page that you were on there.
Yeah, I think it did what it needed to do. I don't think it did it well in all the different strands. I think there were some strands
we'll
that
come
I
to
enjoyed
that, yeah.
more than others.
Yeah.
So-
There's bound to be, isn't it? And I think I probably guessed which way around, but we'll come to it. Simon, did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it, but I think much like Matt, I felt that it didn't. I don't think it did it as well as it could have. I found 3 more satisfying because it was its own beast. It was that fragmented thing. And what I didn't expect is for you get the fragmented episode, then you come together for the Angels episode, which is all very cohesive and moves the story on. And then you get another fragmented episode. And I kind of get that kind of comes with the tone of the story and the thematic side of things. And the elements themselves were all fine and they kind of did their bit, but did it sit together particularly comfortably? I don't know. I enjoyed it because the story was moved on, but I don't know as if it was satisfying, as you said. I don't think it was particularly satisfying.
I think the story of Flux, and when I say the story of Flux, I don't mean the narrative, but I mean, as we view it as viewers, is basically episodes where lots of things are going on in lots of different places, in lots of different time zones, because it's Doctor Who. And I think if you're going to tell a story across 6 parts, you kind of have 2 choices about how you do it. You either do an episode in X place, then an episode in Y place, then an episode in Z place. And this has done a little bit of that with the Sontaran one and the Angels one. Or else you do 6 episodes in which all of it's happening at the same time. And obviously he's chosen to sort of mix and match. But I think his choice mostly is to do that all of the things are happening at the same time, which doesn't make it necessarily the most satisfying thing to watch, I suppose. But I think maybe overall it might end up being more satisfying than if it had been a story in place X, place Y, and then place Z, because that way it is episodic and it's not really all telling the same story. It's telling a bunch of different stories in the same way as Trial of a Time Lord was, or Key to Time was, and those stories are hopefully adding up to something bigger. This is telling a bigger story, and it's not ashamed or it's not afraid to go ahead and tell the bigger story. But that does mean it's a very fragmented viewing experience because it's Doctor Who. So some of it's set in history, some of it's set in outer space, all at the same time. And we're not used to seeing Doctor Who like that. And they're not used to making Doctor Who like that. So I think you've kind of got to give this kudos for attempting that. And I think you've also kind of got to be a bit understanding in that, okay, they never have done anything remotely like this before. So it's not going to be perfect because it doesn't have any precedents to lean on. It's trying all this stuff out for the first time. Somebody said, I think it was on Gallifrey Base, I think it was Jonathan Bloom, said, as engaging as it is or whatever, if you're engaged by it, whatever, can you really put your hand on your heart and say, well, this is what it's about? Because as a story, it's a lot of stuff going on, and it had something that happened at the start that becomes a mystery that the rest of the episodes therefore unravel. But is it actually about anything? Is it about a threat to the Earth? Not really. Is it about a threat to the Doctor? Not really. Is it about a threat to this, that, or the other? Is it about something that the story is saying about, life in the 21st century? Not really to any of these things. All of these things have elements that are there. There are bits of it that relate to, what life is like in the 21st century. There are bits of it that relate to threats to the Doctor or threats to the Earth or whatever. But it's not really about any of those things. So I think overall, it's probably like this massive folly that is that is absolutely worth having been attempted, but that in the end might not necessarily add up to more than the sum of its parts. So I'm kind of prepared for it all to make sense at the end, but also I'm kind of, and we don't know. We'll get there when we get there. But I'm kind of also preparing myself for, oh, is that what it all added up to in the end?
Yeah, you're right. In as much as it's quite inward looking, it's about Doctor Who studying itself and turning itself inside out.
In a way, yeah.
Which is a great experiment, and for the most part, it's working really well. But like you say, it'd be nice if at the end we got some little nugget that kind of tweaked our sensibilities. That there was some big thing where you go, oh, so that's what it was all about, and that would be really nice if that happens.
But
if it doesn't, it'll still be okay. But
isn't it all about the Doctor and about the self-discovery of her past? Isn't that the most obvious thing? Is it that's the thread that I've been seeing, and everything else is happening around her.
Is it? Yeah.
It doesn't matter how big the flux and how big the themes are of universes collapsing. It is about the Doctor and her mum.
I agree with Lee. In that I think this episode brought us closer to having a coherent theme or message. But instead of the Doctor wanting to find out about her past, I think the message is the Doctor coming to terms with the fact that she doesn't need to find out about her past to be the Doctor. So she can.
Yeah.
I think that fob watch is even though we see it potentially, well, spoiler.
But we've already had that question asked and answered back when the Master told it.
The Timeless Children, yeah. It doesn't matter where I came from. I am who I am. She made that.
She was lying because she then spent ages trying to find out about her past.
Yeah.
But not telling her companions. Because that's the state we found her in at the beginning of Flux, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And
it's the temptation, isn't it? The watch is the apple on the tree of Adam and Eve, isn't it? It's just like if she bites into that, she's going to be unleashing her past. And does she want to do that? Well, but she's going to anyway because that's what everybody would do.
Next week's episode will probably end or have a moment where she has that. There'll be a choice where she gets the opportunity to open the fob watch and have her memories restored. But there will probably be a choice where she can either do that or else sacrifice the fob watch in aid of a greater good. Save the universe by sacrificing the fob watch or something.
Presumably pouring her abused memories into Swarm or one of the glam rock villains blowing their tiny minds.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? But it will be... it's almost certainly going to end up with us not knowing. Maybe we'll get a glimpse, but we won't know the whole story, and neither will she. And the fob watch will be destroyed, which leaves the mystery back where it was at the end of
the lost children, or lost in the other universe.
Yeah, maybe, because this could end up going into a different universe as a kind of big reset for us to sort of start again. So Earth can go back to what it was before the Flux came along or whatever. So a parallel universe of some kind. Because we did say at the start, somehow this is going to have to all take place in a bubble universe in order for us to be able to go back to the status quo afterwards. So, that's one thing. What did we think? Let's get into the nitty gritty of bits and pieces that happened throughout the episode. What did we think of the fact that the Doctor is an angel now was basically a huge bluff on Chris Chibnall's behalf? I grinned, I have to say, when we discovered that. There was a little bit where it's sort of mind palace-y when she's surrounded by all the other angels, but then before we know it, it was just a mode of transport, and basically the whole thing was a big nothing. But I thought, what a great way to end the last episode, and who cares? Because we knew she was going to be back in the end.
I cared slightly because I had the idea of the mind palace-y Doctor being in it, and in fact that was kind of what we got anyway. It was just in a different place. I think the transition from the cliffhanger to her being in the division space, I didn't quite buy that. That wasn't very smooth. So I kind of understood what was going on, but it kind of jumped from place to place.
Yeah.
with a very, very quick bit of exposition in the middle. And
I've only seen it once, but are we to take it that the stuff where she's surrounded by angels is what's happening while she's in the angel, and then when she comes out into division is when she gets released from it?
I think so.
That's what I took from it.
Yeah. That's
But
how
I think
it felt to me. Yeah.
this is what I meant by. So this was the bit that I was disappointed by, because last week's episode was a highlight of the series and the cliffhanger was strong. And I think last week's episode did do this kind of taking place all over the place, but it felt a bit more coherent and a bit more paced. So everything seemed to roll in a less fragmented way. And I kind of hoped that would continue to roll into this episode. And then the resolution of the cliffhanger was kind of symptomatic of how fractured it became. And I didn't actually mind the fracturedness so much, but because it came after last week's, which was very coherent, very well paced and constructed, it felt more fragmented than it actually was. It felt more fragmented than episode 3 to me, because it suffered, I think.
How about you, Lee? I mean, you've only just seen it, so you've barely had time to absorb it, but
I was massively zoning out there. Sorry, Matt, I missed everything you just said. I was thinking about the episode. I was thinking about the whole Indiana Jones stuff that was going on.
That was great.
It was,
I
but I couldn't quite get the point why they're traveling around the world. Like the Martha Jones had a reason, right? So she was given.
You maybe missed it, but the doctor did give her a reason.
It was really vague, wasn't it?
She gave her instructions. She needed to find out when the destruction of the Earth was due to take place.
I mean,
didn't they know that because that's where they came from?
Well, presumably, but at the same time, some of that got thrown back to the Sontarans in the Crimea, right? So I suspect maybe what Jodie Whittaker's alluding to there is the fact that the destruction wrought by the Flux might not happen anymore at the time when it did, because something wibbly wobbly's happened. I don't know.
Or actually the destruction was delayed by the Carvanista ships. So what they're trying to find is when that shield is going to fracture.
Maybe,
and that's when the destruction will take place.
But knowing that she's in the past, or they're both all in the past, because the Doctor does know that, and knowing that they're only human and they're only going to last so long, you've got to travel the planet very slowly to discover things. Which, I mean, that's not my first thought, is to get into Indiana Jones gear and start looking through temples. I mean, I don't. My first thought would be like, what do you mean? I just sit there.
So she doesn't know they're in the past, because she records that message as they're leaving the planet Time before the Angels story.
Is
that right? So she does a bit like Judi Dench in Spectre, who records an extra video for James Bond. She's recorded this message in advance whilst Yaz is in the other room, saying,
that makes it even worse.
Find something else.
That makes it even worse, because even the Doctor doesn't even know that in the past she's given this instruction. And Yaz has thought, do you know what we need to do? We need to travel around the world and look at small, vague clues and spend. And also,
if you're stuck, you'd find an excuse just to travel around the world.
I love it. I love it. I think it works really well. And it's film level. It's movie. It's epic. It's the whole episode is a space opera, which we've always wanted Doctor Who to be. It's like the film that was going to happen.
In the middle of all that stuff, I was struck by one thought. But surely they know what's going to happen to the Titanic. Why would they get on it? Only to realise that, of course, it wasn't the Titanic. Simon, trying to keep things moving along. So give us a few thoughts on the Angel bluff, and give us a few thoughts on Yaz and the others travelling around the Earth.
I think the story and all of these episodes are trying to do a lot of really good stuff, and I'm amazed to what degree and to what quality it is. But I also think, every now and again it never drops the ball, but I do think there's certain things like, I imagine him having this idea of the Doctor becoming an angel and thinking that's a really cool image, and wouldn't it be brilliant if, and that thought process only going so far, which is why it kind of it tailed off for the beginning of this episode, in as much as it almost wasn't what it promised. But
I've got
That
to say
may
one
be
thing
that
before
may be
you
down.
move
Not,
on.
I don't think that's down to the writing. I
Maybe
think
I
that's
won't.
possibly. I think there's a few things happening in this episode which is happening through the screenplay as opposed to the script, if that makes sense. It's how it's being translated onto screen. You know, like was it you saying, Matt, that when she came out of the angel and that was the transport, it didn't quite sit properly. You didn't get that transition from the Mind Palace to when she arrived.
No,
And
she
I don't think
explains.
that's in the
She
writing.
explains everything all the time, but she didn't explain that bit. So we were sitting there going, "What? Where is she?" Yeah.
You know, there's that, and I think there's certain characters that don't really hit home for me as well. There's who's
Sorry,
that?
carry on.
It's Lee Professional Rawlings, the
the
trained
head
broadcaster.
the head serpent or whoever he is, the guy who's supposedly infiltrated UNIT. I don't know if it's me, and I do think this is a series that's going to be rewatched and rewatched because I don't really get what the point of him is.
Well, we'll find out next week, presumably.
Yet.
Yeah, I suppose, but he's just kind of existing. He's not really doing much, is he? I
Well,
suppose he did a bit this week, but
he has done. Yeah. Well,
and then
we'll find out.
Vinder and his girlfriend.
They had a comical near miss. That's
Yeah.
And they're
I'm not
they're
sure it
kind
was-
of being moved around like chess pieces to get them into the right position for the conclusion. It feels like. I quite like the Serpent guy. I thought he's had his entire empire destroyed by the Flux, so he's decided to go to the one safe place in the entire universe, which is Earth, and then kind of engineer his way into power, into society at the top of UNIT, so he can control it in order to get the Sontarans in.
I think he's kind of the master that isn't the crazy master. I mean, he would sit nicely with a nice little beard, wouldn't he?
I think
kind of
he's
the
a
whole
bit
point
dull, if I'm honest. He's a bit
Really?
dull. Yeah.
But kind of the point of him engineering UNIT is so that because he needs to have some kind of manner of being able to get in touch with, outer space from Earth while he's there. So he comes down to Earth and he joins the one organization, creates the organization, which will give him the most control over being able to communicate with outer space, right? So, I mean, all of that adds up. What his ultimate goal is, because I don't think getting the Sontarans back is the ultimate goal. I saw one comment somewhere from somebody saying, "Oh, so it all comes down to the Sontarans, does it?" And I'm thinking, hang on. In play in next week's episode, you've got the Daleks and the Cybermen as well as the Sontarans, but you've got Swarm and Azure, and you've got whatever's going on with the Division as well, and you've got the Doctor trying to save the universe from this flux that was created by the Division. It hasn't all come down to the Sontarans. The Sontarans are just, that little bit of irritation that's going to keep the Doctor from being able to do things in the easiest way. That when you've got a job to do and something comes and gets in your way and stops you from being able to do the job, that's what all fiction really comes down to in the end, isn't it? The hero.
That's warfare as well, isn't it? If you look at warfare, anything happening, it doesn't just happen in one place. Somebody's fighting something over there, somebody else is raiding something there. Well, that's been fought. When everything collapses, somebody else is taking advantage of that. The politicians are running away and other politicians are coming in. There's so much going on, and this is what I feel. This is very space opera, and I love the fact that the Sontarans came in right at the end. You think you've seen the last of them, they come back in, it's like, well, they couldn't do what they wanted to do. Now they're given the opportunity again, and they're just noob-headed kind of weirdos just turning out with guns, wanted to slaughter everything, and that's something the Doctor can deal with. But the Doctor isn't there on Earth, so the threat is suddenly real. So that's happening whilst you got the Flux going on. I think it works. It's just working really, really well at the moment, isn't it?
I think so.
This is actually really good Doctor Who we're seeing here, isn't it?
I think so. I've been saying all series, and I've been saying since the start of this period of Doctor Who, I think there's something in the production that means I can't quite get into it as much as I've got into other periods of Doctor Who, like Stephen Moffat, whatever. But yeah, apart from that, I think, I said at the start of this recording, this is like a grand folly, but that's not a criticism. That's a compliment. really enjoyed this and really been engaged with it. And the fact that there's one episode left. I mean, everything that Chris Chibnall does, again, we found out more about the Passenger this week. We found out what they're using the Passenger for, or the passengers for, in order to create this technology that they've been using that's got them up to division, right? So basically, the Passenger has been a means to an end. But I don't think we thought at any point over the last 3 weeks that we'd find out what they were using Passenger for. I think we thought it was going to be one of those aspects of the story that was kind of there, not really to be addressed, just something that was happening. But it's not only turned out that they've addressed it, but each week they've addressed it and given us more information until finally we found out exactly what it's for and exactly what they're doing with it and why they needed it. And I think that that's probably going to be the same with the Grand Serpent at UNIT. It might be just that he joins UNIT in order to bring in this distraction. Maybe he's working for Swarm and Azure. Maybe he's working for Tecteun, whatever. But something's going on. We're going to find out more about him because he's in play now. Everything that's in play, Chris Chibnall's written a 6-episode story. Everything that's in play is going to be in play for a reason and is going to have some impact on next week's episode. He hasn't just thrown things like the Grand Serpent in for the sake of having somebody there. He's thrown him in because there's a reason to have him there. So yeah, I'm quite confident that everything will get sort of sewn up, and if anything's left open, and actually we talked last week, the week before, about what we might or might not find out about the Timeless Children and whether that stuff will be hanging over to the specials. I'm not entirely sure it will now. It looks to me more than ever like this will all be wrapped up now, and the 3 specials will really be 3 standalone stories for Jodie Whittaker before the end, unless maybe there's some revelation that comes up in the final one, maybe that helps to lead towards the regeneration in the end. But yeah, it looks like he's sewing all this up now, doesn't it?
I mean,
Unless she ends up in a different universe and has to get herself back, which will take 3 episodes.
I've changed my mind since that. So I thought that the Timeless Children might bleed into the 3 specials, but I think after this episode, I think it's going to be she doesn't want to know. She realizes she doesn't need to know.
Yeah.
The gaps in her memory. She uses that as a way of defeating the Flux, and the conclusion is actually she's the Doctor. It doesn't matter what she's done in the past. And the message to the Doctor Who fans is there's still mystery out there and you don't need to reveal it.
More mystery, really,
yeah.
Because he does what Stephen Moffat does in Hellbent. Remember in Hellbent, where they talk about what the hybrid is and they throw out all these different options? What Stephen Moffat did in that episode of Sherlock, where they came back from, he falls to his death off the side of a building, and they never really explain how he got away with that, how he managed to survive it. But instead, what they did was they threw you lots of different options and you could choose your own. Well, this is sort of Chris Chibnall's version of that. He's told us the story of the Timeless Child, and actually he told it in such a way that we made assumptions about it. And then this week, he's taken those assumptions away again. So he tells it in a way that suggests the Timeless Child was found there having come through the wormhole. But of course, Jodie Whittaker points out, well, how do we know she came through the wormhole? We don't. So, of course, what mystery the Timeless Child was there to provide has actually been expanded in this too. I don't think this really moved the Timeless Children thing on in any way. But what it did was it confirmed that it happened, but at the same time, it rolled back our understanding of what it was that had happened.
And I think the really smart thing is he's potentially made that not just something for the audience. He's made it part of the Doctor's personality or part of the Doctor's motivation of not knowing. So not knowing doesn't just become a sort of, haha, we're going to tease the audience by suggesting a mystery and just leaving it a mystery. The whole point that it's staying a mystery is the point.
Yes, and assuming the fob watch gets destroyed, he also leaves it so that future showrunners can do what they like, but he doesn't leave them an open door to mess around with that. He leaves it in such a place as that's done and dusted. Here's this big space between the Timeless Child and William Hartnell that you can use if you want, but either end of that big space, they're kind of fixed now. So it sort of turns this into a fixed point in a way. I don't know. I don't want to bring up too much more because I do want to keep us moving along, and we will talk more about all of this once we've seen the whole of Flux. At some point in the new year, we'll come back and we'll do a sort of Flux retrospective episode where we'll have the audience vote as well to find out what their favourite episodes were.
A reflux.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Have any of you got anything more that you desperately want to bring up about this?
Not desperately.
Go on, Matt.
I don't really
Yeah.
care. So I was right about Tecteun. That's one to me. I didn't like Barbara Flynn in this. I really like her as an actress, but she did a lot of hand acting. She
did.
And it might have been the direction of her. So she was never fully in screen. So every so often you see her hands like do stuff just in the corner.
I think she's been spending too much time watching William Hartnell.
Yeah.
No, I think she's just watching Jodie in front of her doing this.
And that meant
because at one point they were both doing this at each other.
Yeah, Jodie started doing it. Whittaker started doing it as well.
It's like boxing T-Rexes.
Those were my least favourite bits of the story. I really enjoyed Chibnall trolling fans by putting unit dating on screen in a Rawlings friendly caption thing, saying this is the year this happens. Moffat never did that. Moffat always says 70s or 80s maybe and joked by that, but Chibnall really went for it, was saying 1958 this happened, 1980 this happened. So I liked that, and I liked the Indiana Jones bits. It was just the Division bits I just didn't, I was bored by them and I wasn't actually interested, and that should be like big Doctor Who mythos, like seeing behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, that sort of stuff, and I just wasn't interested in it, partly by the way it was written, partly by the way it was shot, partly by the way it was acted. It just felt like it was slipping back.
Didn't you think that beautiful room they walked into, which is like a giant tree, wasn't that just beautiful? Didn't that make you feel
the
like
special effect was? But once you got out of the way of the special effect, it was just a pretty silly looking, spaceship control room.
It's true, it was. So do we think there's another division on the other side of the universe and they're going to bump into each other?
No. I mean, nothing's impossible, but no. I think this is...
Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think next week, the whole division and Timeless Children and all of that is going to be left behind.
Do we briefly cover the Lethbridge Stewart controversy?
Oh, do you want to? Do we need to?
Well,
what controversy is there?
I kind of share bits of it.
In the episode, there's a bit where they're walking past a room where you can hear Lethbridge Stewart in the background, and the Robert Bathurst character refers to him as Corporal.
Yeah.
Doesn't say Lethbridge Stewart, I don't think, just says Corporal. Of course, in the Web of Fear, he's a colonel, and it's been pointed out that you can't really go from corporal to colonel that quickly, and certainly not from corporal to brigadier as fast as he does.
Yeah. But this is unit. It's not the real army, is it? So they can do what they like.
No, he is in the real army. So he's brought in from the real army.
But I also think there's a possibility that Bathurst, the idea is that Bathurst has just mixed up his terms and he actually is a colonel and he's just called him a corporal by accident.
But the problem is calling him corporal, and I didn't really hear the voice. It was fairly muffled. I actually assumed he was talking about Benton at that stage, which would work, or Yates. But I think it's less about.
I think it was a bit of trolling by Chip.
Yeah, but it's a bit less about the speed of going from corporal to brigadier. It's the fact that you don't go from corporal to brigadier. You go straight in as a lieutenant or a cadet, and that's kind of. It sounds small. It sounds small, but it's actually part of the brigadier's personality. Is he's obviously been to like Sandhurst or an officer's training school and gone straight in. There's a kind of Prince Harry officer at that level. To rise through the ranks like that is a completely different type of soldier. And actually, I quite like the idea that the brigadier rose through the ranks because that changes the nature of the brigadier. But it's a weird thing to do.
But surely since the Big Bang, all of the past has been rewritten somehow anyway. So it doesn't matter.
Not the British Army.
Well, yeah, but Lethbridge Stewart's place in it, maybe. I think the idea is just that, okay, Chris Chibnall's I don't think he's really solving unit dating as sort of, like you say, I think he's not trolling, but and I think this is just another example of that.
Doesn't really matter, does it?
Well, that's kind of the point. It doesn't really matter, but some people will get fixated on it, and he knows that.
Matters to certain publishers who publish books about the backstory of the Brigadier.
It's true.
Intricately created a backstory for the Brigadier.
Just one question, because this hasn't been stated explicitly, but this is just one thought that crossed my mind. In episode 3, when we saw those blue swarm things that seem to be eating people, my thought now is that they weren't eating people so much as just capturing them to be another element of the passenger.
They were sucking them off, you mean, into the passenger?
Well, do we think that's what's happening?
Well, that's a good idea. That's a good enough idea.
That's the impression.
They're very blue,
now.
aren't they? I mean, it's almost like someone's got a felt tip pen and just drawn over the screen.
They're a bit of a blue swarm, like an azure swarm.
I mean, depending on how many people the passenger has sucked off, I do wonder if it's going to be part of the solution, because you move to a new universe, and that's fine. But so long as you dump all the people out, then you've basically taken Earth along with you and just put Earth back in this parallel Earth. It's going to be complicated.
That's potentially. See, I read this book years ago. It never got published, but one of the things that happens in this book is you give. Oh, shut up, Lee. This book gave or would have given an explanation for why all aliens in the universe basically look like human beings, because we all come from the same stock. I wonder if Chris Chibnall's had the same idea. So you move into a new universe, take these passengers through, and they populate however many planets, and that's why everybody in the universe looks like people.
Like it.
Like in Next Generation.
Did they do that in there too? Yeah. Well, it makes sense.
Well, they've all got funny humans with funny foreheads.
So inside the passengers we were looking at mountain ranges, weren't we? It was massive, wasn't it? Is that what I was looking at?
Well, inside the passenger is a mind space, like the Mind Palace thing, I guess. So
another mind space.
Yeah. But then that's become a feature, a sort of recurring feature of Doctor Who lately. Stephen Moffat did it a fair amount, and now Chris Chibnall's doing it as well. So I think it's just one of those sort of recurring features at the moment. And
the New Adventures spent
lots of
pages of chapters of books doing it.
Oh yes, because of course Paul Cornell used to love that kind of stuff, didn't he? So yeah. But
the passenger is physical, isn't it? I mean, he's taking people physically, whereas say the angel that took Jodie was, that was an internal, a subconscious. She was connecting telepathically or whatever on this Mind Palace thing. But Vin Diesel, he got sucked off by the passenger, and ended up, physically being sucked off as opposed to.
Yeah, it wasn't just sucking his head off. It was sucking his entire self off. I get the impression that the passenger is a kind of TARDIS that's sort of bigger on the inside, so it has a greater capacity for the number of people.
Or it could be like the Nether Sphere from Series 8. So it could be just that their essence is contained within in the form of data, and that when they get sort of recombobulated as they come back out, they're basically a new person built from the data of the else.
It was only they were data. We their bodies were still in they were dead. They were in the ground, weren't they? So it's But
I'm saying
Vin,
it could
Vin,
be
Vin,
like that, back. Not exactly the same thing as that. You know what I've always said.
Literal Lee strikes again.
Yeah. What I've always said about teleport machines is that you break up a person into atoms at one end, send the information down the line, and then at the other end, you put a person together from the atoms that are in the air around, and essentially that person at the other end of the teleport is a new person. Well, the passenger in that analogy would be the teleport machine. The person gets discombobulated as they go in and recombobulated as they come out. It would be made up of different atoms.
So we go from WAV to MP3 in the passenger.
I like the way JR went all Fred Dibner about teleport machines. The thing I've always said about teleport machines.
Well, I have said it many, many times on this podcast, especially when we were talking about, obviously, Heaven Sent.
Also,
is
could
Chris
you look,
is
Matt,
Chris
have you got
Chibnall
a
doing
dictionary
a
with-
Stephen Moffat then of showing us
Yes.
how it works with the angels, with transporting the
I
Doctor?
think so. Speaking of the angels, there's talk about, well, did she need to be an angel to get up there? Was that just, I mean, did Lee not say it? Was that not just for the visual effect? But I think, yes. I think if you're going to be transported outside the universe, you're going to need a very particular mode of transport to get there. And the angels, uniquely in Doctor Who, because of the way they're set up, the whole premise of the angels, it's not perfect, it's not exact, but the angels are the nearest thing you've got. So yes, being an angel would, to me, seem to be the perfect mode of transport for going sort of exo-universal. And that's kind of why the angels are used in the first place thematically, because the angels have always been about taking people out of time. So if you're talking about literally taking people right out of time and space altogether, thematically, it's right that it's the angels who do it. So yeah, I think this is, in some ways, and not in every way, but in some ways, I think this is more intelligent Doctor Who than we generally tend to see. I think this is really intelligent Doctor Who.
And
I
I
do
do
agree
like
with that.
the fact that the angels have a dark sense of humor about them, because obviously if you're going to send somebody in the past and feed off their energy, as it were, part of you is going to be like, where are we going to send them to? Do you know what I mean? They have got this Pan thing going on. They've got this very naughty, I don't know, yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. But it was good that it came out like that, we just did it for a bit of fun. I mean, as opposed to anything grand and big. And I thought, wow,
Yeah.
that's good. We've got personality finally from an angel.
Should we give it a score? Matt, would you like to score this out of 10?
I can't remember what I gave episode 3. I think I gave episode 3 6, and I think
Yeah.
I'll give this one a 7 because I did like the A and B plot more than I like the A and B plot in episode 3.
Lee, do you want to give this one a score?
It's a space opera. I'm loving it, but it isn't perfect. So I'd say 8.
I'll concur with Lee. I'm really enjoying this, and I'm very much engaged with it. But yeah, it's not the very toppest notch of Doctor Who, and until we see how it fits together, it's not the most satisfying on an episode by episode basis. So I'll give it an 8 too. Simon.
There weren't any punch the air moments, and there weren't any laughs, which I've got used to in this season. It's the first Chibnall season where I've been really laughing. And
What about the Nepalese guy on the mountain?
he was okay.
Yeah,
I laughed at him. I laughed at
Okay.
I laughed at the rope bit as well, because Kevin McNally sells anything. Like Barbara Flynn, I don't think pulled off her role. Kevin McNally, you can put him in any bit of Doctor Who, and I'd be happy watching it.
You've been
Kevin
going on about
McNally.
people getting sucked off, and now you're saying about people getting
Pull
pulled.
back up, yeah.
Kevin McNally and John Bishop are the new Jago and Lightfoot.
Yeah. Oh, just on that note, though, I think John Bishop, very quickly, he's the one weak point for me at the moment. He's brilliant, but I don't think he's getting enough story. He's not getting enough. He's been around on the Earth for 3 years, and I'm not hearing anything about the history of those 3 years. I can't see him develop in those 3 years. It'd be nice to see him do something a bit more than say the odd joke in the background.
He grew a
I
bit.
I get the impression, because of his connection, sort of, with the Liverpool Tunnel guy, and because of the fact that it was Carvanista who was brought forward and so sent in early to pick up Dan in the first place, I get the impression Dan's going to be central to the resolution to it.
There are some really great sci-fi ideas going on in this series, though. It's the most sci-fi it's been for a long time, isn't it? With that idea of those networked tunnels taking you into different times and places, which is great. But
And
anyway,
for a score, yeah.
As for a score, I'm enjoying it, but it didn't pique my interest. I didn't think, that bit was really good or anything like that. So it's got to be a 7 for me.
Sure. Now, there's one bit of really interesting news that's come out this week, and that is about the future of Doctor Who post Chris Chibnall. Bad Wolf Productions have registered a trade name under which they're going to be producing Doctor Who. And this is pretty standard stuff, as you'll have seen at the end of a lot of TV programs and at the end of most films, I guess. Most films are made by a production company, but the production company will set up a limited company just for that particular movie. And so Bad Wolf have set up a limited company in order to make Doctor Who. And the name of it got revealed this week. I don't think they revealed it. I think somebody found it on
company. You just find it on Company's House.
I think somebody found it on the Company's House website, and so it was sort of, accidentally released to the world. And that wouldn't be news in itself. But when you hear what the name of the company is, then it suddenly starts to make you go, ooh. The name of the company is Whoniverse 1. Whoniverse being the idea being that's going to be more shows than just Doctor Who. The fact that it's Whoniverse 1 to make Doctor Who absolutely set it up the idea that there'll be a Whoniverse 2 and a Whoniverse 3 and a Whoniverse 4 for various spin-offs. So although this doesn't confirm the intention to make more series than just Doctor Who, it certainly corroborates the idea that Russell T Davies is coming in order to do spin-offs and a Doctor Who universe as well.
Either that or somebody's registered Whoniverse and it's not available.
Well, the fact that it's Whoniverse as opposed to just Who
Yeah.
kind of sets up the idea that it's more show than just the one show. So the fact that it's Whoniverse 1, who knows? Yeah, I'll tell you something else I mentioned when there was a conversation. There was a conversation about whether Doctor Who will move back to Saturdays when it comes back with Bad Wolf. I suggested, because here's the thing, I think when Doctor Who moved to Sundays, moving to New Year's Day was part of that same thing. I think Chris Chibnall probably had a conversation with the BBC and they said, look, this show's, getting on for 15 years old now. In what way can we shake it up? And as well as changing things up by casting a woman as the Doctor, one of the other things you do is try to shake up the broadcast. And so he moved from Saturdays to Sundays to try and shake up the broadcast to sort of pique people's interest. But I think moving to New Year's Day was part of that same process. I think that was not because they were tired of doing it on Christmas Day, but because they wanted to try and shake up people's interest. I wonder when Russell T Davies and Bad Wolf come back, whether they'll try something like that again. So I'm not suggesting this is what I think will happen, but I'm suggesting it's a possibility. Doctor Who used to be in the middle of weekend, and it used to be in the middle of the Christmas schedule. What they did was they moved it to the end of the weekend, so it's like the last thing you get before you go back into the school week or the working week. And they moved it to the end of the Christmas holiday, so it's on New Year's Day. So it's the last thing again before you go back to school or you go back to the working week. I wonder if Russell T Davies will say, okay, so what else could we do? Maybe we could make it the first thing that happens on the weekend or the first thing that happens on the Christmas holiday. So instead of being on a Saturday, maybe it could go to a Friday. And instead of being on Christmas Day or New Year's Day, maybe it could be that treat on Christmas Eve before Santa comes the next morning. So I'm not saying I think that'll necessarily happening. Just saying that's a suggestion for something that could.
And
on
Christmas
that note,
Eve.
Yeah, possibly. Who knows? But on that note, we'll leave it. Next week we'll be back probably the same time because my work schedule is probably going to be the same next week. And we'll talk about the final part of Flux. Until we do that, I was JR.
I was Lee.
I was Matt.
I was Simon.
And for those of you watching on video, Simon and I are going to stick around and do something else for 20 minutes or so. But Lee and Matt are going to say goodbye and disappear. So bye-bye, Lee, and bye-bye, Matt.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Simon, then, just the two of us now. And we are going to, well, shall we just do it? And people can find out what we're going to do as we get stuck into it.
Mm-hmm. You're going to do an intro?
Yeah, I am. I'm also just calling up the stuff I need in order to be able to do it. So I'll expand that and I'll shrink that so that I can see what I'm doing here. Right, here we go then. You're listening to Music Club Extra, and for the next 20 minutes, we are going to be reviewing Peter Capaldi's album, St. Christopher, So You Don't Have to. Hi, I'm JR.
And I'm Simon.
And so, well, I guess my first impression of this is, well, is this not what Tom Waits might have made if he'd been living in London, in Camden, in 1978 or 1980? I don't know. What was your first impression of this, Simon?
Funny enough, earlier conversation with Matt, he doesn't realise this because I didn't get a word in edgeways, but he basically said the name Leonard Cohen, which is the first thing that occurred to me.
Oh, really? Was it?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I don't know if that's accidental, whether that's a definite influence on what's happened. But as we talk, I'll go into my theories.
Okay. Well, okay. I think you've kind of brought up the elephant in the room. So I think let's have a few words on the elephant in the room, and then we'll talk about the record. Because I think the elephant in the room is Peter Capaldi. He was in bands, but he was the guitarist or whatever. He's not a singer. And I think this album, I think one of the first things you notice about it when you very first listen to it is he's not a singer. And I think 4 or 5 listens down, I think I've heard it maybe 6 or 7 times now. I think maybe 3, 4, 5 listens down, you just don't care anymore and you just start enjoying the songs. But I also think to somebody less inclined to be generous, I think it could be the kind of thing that might be an issue. And I certainly think it's not something that you can't notice. And I don't think it's like terrible or anything, but it is one of those records that's very much talk sung rather than sung song.
Yeah, he's more of a vocalist than a singer, maybe.
And that's probably why the Leonard Cohen comparison, maybe.
Maybe so, but also the tone of the songs and some of the melodic qualities as well. I think it's quite rich, in that respect.
I thought my first impression was very much that this is based around that sort of post-punk new wave sound that Peter Capaldi would have been, doing in any bands that he was. I'm not sure whether he was just in one band or whether a series of bands. He was certainly in a band before his acting career took off. And whatever that band was, they were doing post-punk new wave stuff. I'm pretty sure of it. And I think I get the impression that this is kind of partly the album that he would have made back then in a band. But I also think this has the maturity of 30 years of an acting career behind it. And so he's kind of I think it kind of has the musical soundscape of something that would have been made in 1978, albeit with 2021 production values. But it has the sort of lyrical and musical maturity of something that's been sort of driven by 30 years in the industry. So it's a storytelling album. And again, that feeds into the Leonard Cohen thing and the Tom Waits thing. And Nick Cave, I suppose, is another potential influence. So was that your, maybe, is that fair to say, do you think?
Totally. I mean, the storytelling side of it is the bit that kept me listening. And I've listened to it 3 or 4 times now, this album. And every time I find something new in there. It's not the cleverest of albums, but equally I like the simplicity of it. That and it's, some people might say it's predictable because it's got those same kind of bluesy arrangements. But equally, I'm interested in how much of it is down to Dr. Roberts' production as well. That for me, being the electronic head that I am, I found those side of things. From the off, there was a fairly heavy synth involvement. And what I really liked was that at no point did it feel like the guitar was taking over. That there's no ego at play here. This is what I really liked about it, was that unlike other albums that are suddenly by an actor or somebody who's not usually a musician, there's almost like an undercurrent of them trying to prove something and trying to say, well, the one that kept springing to mind was the Bruce Willis album.
Oh, right,
when that came out, do you remember? And it was, it felt like a big ego trip, and I don't feel like there's any of that going on. And it feels like these songs are extremely personal, and they couldn't though you say, it's kind of the sort of stuff he would have done in the late 70s. But you also said that, this is an album from an older actor, somebody who's lived a life. And in that respect, I think it's worth listening to. And I think it's artistically valid, very much so.
Totally, yeah. That's kind of partly what I meant by this is the album he would have made back then if he'd have not gone into an acting career. This is not the work of an actor as an ego trip or as a vanity massage or whatever. This is the work of somebody who's always had music in his life.
Yeah, it's the work of an artist.
And who's just finally had an opportunity to actually do something that he's probably always wanted to do, but just kind of one of those things he's probably never got around to. It all came about because of the Monks Road Social thing. So Peter Capaldi, I'm not sure whether he was on holiday or somehow he just happened to meet Dr. Robert, became aware of the Monks Road Social thing, got involved with it. Monks Road Social is like a sort of big collaborative effort where lots of musicians will come together in various formations and write and record songs, and it's sort of whoever's available or whoever's needed at the time gets to be on it. Peter Capaldi became involved, and on one of the albums there's a Peter Capaldi song, and that was what spurred this into happening. So this feels kind of collaborative in that sense too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About the autobiographical thing, this is a really interesting thing because there's a lot on this album that's kind of storytelling. One of my favorite singers is Amy Mann, and this doesn't remind me of her in sort of the sense of the production or the sound, but in the storytelling sense, it feels a little bit like that because it feels like Peter Capaldi is telling fictional stories about situations and characters that are extrapolations of things from his life. And a lot of it is very much about his early life. So one of the really notable songs on there, I think possibly my favorite, is called A Little Bit of Class. And basically, A Little Bit of Class is told from the point of view of a child who doesn't understand the complex relationships that adults have. And the child is trying to figure out who this person, who's not his mum or his dad, but who sort of inveigled their way into his household, into his family, kind of. He's trying to work out who this person is. And the way Capaldi tells it, and I've got to say, I'm not sure whether it's a northern thing, but it's a little bit of class rather than a little bit of class. Have you ever heard that expression in that sense? A little bit of class, to talk about a sort of extraneous female who comes into the circle of friends and who they all sort of defer to, because this was very much something I recognise from my childhood in Yorkshire. I wonder if it's a northern thing, because it feels very much a northern thing. But kind of the point is, I don't think this Muriel in the song is somebody he necessarily actually knew, but the Muriel in the song is there to represent situations and people that he would have been aware of as he was growing up. Because there was never a Muriel in my life as I was growing up. But definitely when I was growing up and when I was in Yorkshire, I knew of people who had a Muriel in their home situation. So I absolutely recognized the situation and completely identified with the child who couldn't quite work it out. And then who probably later in life realizes what was going on. I shouldn't say it, but my grandmother was a Muriel. So, it's very familiar, and several of the other songs sort of follow similar paths into sort of stories where you sort of feel that he's talking about something that he knows, but not necessarily something that he specifically was involved with.
Yeah, you do get these characters who come into your life, and particularly relatives who are that little bit more sophisticated and quite exciting when they would visit, and it was always an event when they visited. So yeah, while I didn't necessarily have a Muriel in my family, I can completely relate for other reasons. And right through life, there are certain people who turn up who have that kind of rock star, pop star, not so much persona, but they've just got something about them where you almost think there's someone to aspire to as well.
But also they cause division amongst everybody else because they're sort of an extraneous element that's come in. and is upset the sort of status quo. I think that's kind of the sort of message is, and of course at the end of the song, Muriel disappears again, and the status quo. The sort of question that the song leaves hanging is, will the status quo be able to reassert itself, or is the division that Muriel's caused something that's going to be a permanent rift? And it's never stated what the division is because it's told from the point of view of this child. So this child just sort of doesn't even speculate on the possibilities, but allows the listener to form that speculation themselves. And there's a lot of this sort of darkness across the album. There's one song that's kind of about a stalker. There's another song that sort of leans slightly into stalker territory as well. The Great Magnificence, the song that sort of the album's sort of formatted almost as if it's got a 5-song side A and a 5-song side B, and Grand Magnificence is kind of the end of the first part of the album, and it ends on a great sort of electro type bit that sort of feels very 1980s in a way, which I'm sure you appreciated.
Which one? Which song is this on?
The Great Magnificence. The one
I thought
with
it was Impossible. I thought it was Impossible Youth, where it ends with just this great big magnificent, very Leonard Cohen, very late Leonard Cohen drum beat. Or am I getting the songs mixed up here?
I think you're getting mixed up because that's the
Okay.
Great Magnificence, I'm sure, with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
synth bit over the drums.
It's by far the strongest track, I would say.
Would you? Oh,
Yeah, I
that's
would.
interesting because it wasn't one of my favourites. Although there are certain things about it that I love.
I
But
do
yeah,
feel like that's Dr. Robert letting loose on the mixing desk with that track at the end,
yeah, maybe
because it's almost like got two parts, isn't it? You've got that last
Yeah,
bit,
yeah.
which is great.
But it feels like a collaboration between the two. It feels like
Definitely,
maybe Capaldi's saying, well, what can we do here? And Dr. Robert saying, well, here's a suggestion. How do you feel about this? It feels like there's a back and forth. It feels, though, very, very much like it's Peter Capaldi's album. Obviously, I'm big on the Blow Monkeys and Dr. Robert, and I've got all this stuff. And there's nothing remotely like this in their back catalogue, I wouldn't say musically. But then sometimes when you collaborate with somebody who's very different from you musically, that brings out something different in you too. So yeah, it feels like there's a bit of a back and forth between the two of them going on with this.
The other thing that occurred to me, particularly in the first few tracks, is it's really quite Roxy music, and like 70s Bowie with some of the brass.
Yeah.
There's a lot of saxophone and what have you in there is very evocative of that time. It's really lovely.
And there are things, you can hear also Teardrop Explodes, I think. And unless I'm misremembering, Howard Devoto magazine, that kind of stuff is also an influence too, I think. So, I mean, but the thing is, I don't think it has little bits of all these influences, but it doesn't really sound like any of them. He's managed to find a sound, and I think that's part of, making this record in 2021 and having the production values of the modern day. And making it with Dr. Robert as well, who might like all these things but tends to be influenced elsewhere. I think so. This record feels unique and different from all those things, but you can hear all those things going on. So it's a bit like a sort of treasure chest where you open the album up, and it took me a few listens to get there. But once you're a few listens in, you open the album up, and suddenly you hear all these things going on, and you keep. But they never distract you from the central core of the record. So you listen to the record, and I don't think it's massively varied in approach and tone. There's one that's a bit jazzy. There's one that's a bit acoustic. But a lot of the time, it's kind of electric guitar, drum, bass, bandy. It's very much that sort of thing, but with synths going on as well to give you the scope and the variety. But yeah, it feels very consistent. But at the same time, within that consistency, it feels like there's an awful lot going on in the background that makes each of the 10 songs quite distinct and different. And there are 2 or 3 of them that really do feel kind of different as well. On the second half of it, there's one called In Person. That's the one about the stalker. That's probably the most up-tempo thing there. And then the title track's perhaps the most upbeat thing there. And both of those, by the time you get to that stage of the album, track 7 and track 9, both of those feel like that they've been inserted into those places deliberately to give you a bit of a lift, just in case maybe your attention was starting to wane or whatever.
Another thing I thought was interesting was, as well, and I don't know if it's intentional or not, but certainly from the first track, his voice is really high in the mix compared to the backing, and I don't know whether that's probably intent. I'm assuming that's to kind of say that, well, this is Peter Capaldi's album. This is about him, because it's that first intro is just everything you would expect from him. It is that rich voice. And then, I really like his voice. I mean, you're right. It's not a stereotypical singing voice, but it is as rich as it's ever been.
And it's a storytelling voice, is what it is.
It is, and it's it's not. There's no auto tune on there or anything like that, and I love that. I love the fact that it's raw, and it is a product of the people involved. It's very honest, I think.
There are several songs, I think 3, maybe even 4, where it starts off with just his voice in talkie mode, basically telling you something before the actual song kicks in. That first one does it, very much so. It's almost like a deliberate, well, it is. It's a deliberate introduction to the album, isn't it? To have this talkie bit for the first 30 seconds. But then it happens again, at least twice more. So it becomes a feature of the songwriting that he'll often, and you're right, on one of the tracks, the very last track, unless you're listening with headphones or have it turned right up, he's doing this sort of talky bit at the start, and you can be forgiven for not even realizing there's music underneath it. And it's a very structured album as well as what I've just said about tracks 7 and 9. That last track is deliberately written to be the sort of epic one, with the big sort of musical crescendo in the middle before you come back for the final verse and chorus at the end. And it's surprising how much, because a lot of the songs don't do sort of first chorus, solo chorus, first chorus, solo chorus. They do that, but there's so much going on in the verses that often, the verse can be going on for quite a while before it suddenly kicks into a bridge or a chorus or something. And you suddenly think, oh, right, he is writing songs as opposed to just writing music that he's singing over. Because there is quite a lot going on with a lot of this stuff. I think that's one of the great things about it, is that there's a real depth and texture to it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's very listenable.
Should we give this one a score then, since we scored the other one we did? Out of 10. Go on then, Simon. What would you give this out of 10, do you think?
I'm going to give this a strong 7.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't think it's not quite an 8 out of 10 album, which I've always gone on about my 8 out of 10 albums. I always keep coming back to. Where they're slightly flawed, and that's what makes them interesting. 7 because I think it's a really good, solid album. And as I say, it's absolute credit to those involved, because it is, that awful word authentic is overused at the moment in music, isn't it? But it is authentic.
It is,
because it is an absolute product of the energies that have been put into it, and it's really good.
It's a very organic sounding one as well, which is a word I've used a couple of times recently. But again, I think it really fits here. It really does feel like it's an organic product, not just in the way it was written, but in the way it's produced, I think. So I would have been on a 7 too, I think. But like I say, I've probably heard it 6 or 7 times now, I think. And each time I hear it, I like it more, and it feels stronger, and I care less about the faults. There's no question there are faults, but I care less about the faults the more I listen. So actually, I'm going up from a 7 to an 8. So yeah. So Peter Capaldi, and it's just shipping on CD as well as we speak. So hopefully that'll arrive in the post in a couple of days. So until we do this again, I suppose I was JR.
And I was Simon.
And we will speak again soon.